When everything becomes cheap enough to dominate the world, survival itself becomes expensive. For more than 4 decades, China's rise appeared unstoppable. It became the factory of the planet, powered by an efficiency so relentless it looked almost superhuman. Cities that never slept, assembly lines glowing through the night, prices that fell year after year until competitors across Europe, North America, and Asia simply gave up. This was not just growth, it was industrial domination. The miracle was built on scale, discipline, and speed. China turned human labor into economic horsepower and transformed itself from a poor agrarian society into the backbone of global manufacturing. But every miracle hides a cost. And today, China's greatest strength, its ability to make everything cheaper, faster, and bigger, has become the very force dragging it into crisis, where money, power, and history collide. Because China's story is not just about factories or exports, it is the story of modern capitalism pushed to its absolute limit, a system optimized so aggressively that it begins to consume itself. What happens when efficiency stops creating wealth and starts destroying it? What happens when growth becomes exhaustion? To answer that, we must return to the beginning of the Chinese economic miracle. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping shattered one of socialism's deepest taboos. He declared that getting rich was not shameful, it was patriotic. With those words, China rewrote its future. The country didn't abandon communism outright, but it bent it around markets. Peasants were allowed to sell surplus crops, entrepreneurs were tolerated, then encouraged, and foreign capital, once viewed as a threat, was invited in. China created special economic zones, small experimental cities where capitalism was allowed to operate freely. No heavy bureaucracy, no ideological purity tests, just one goal: attract investment and export to the world. The results were explosive. Shenzhen, once a fishing village of 30,000 people, became a megacity of millions. What worked there spread everywhere. Provinces competed to replicate the formula. Cities raced to build ports, highways, factories, and industrial parks. By the early 2000s, China was no longer growing alongside the global economy. It was absorbing it. Steel, cement, coal, copper, oil. China devoured demand on a scale history had never seen. Western corporations offshored production en masse. If something could be manufactured, it eventually would be made in China. Cheap labor, massive scale, and a state willing to bend rules made competition nearly impossible. But beneath this rise was a dangerous incentive structure. Success meant being cheaper than everyone else. Local governments cut land prices, taxes, and environmental enforcement to attract factories. Companies cut margins, wages, and quality to survive. Growth became the only metric that mattered. Sustainability was ignored. It was a race to the bottom disguised as national progress. For years, the machine worked. Rural migrants flooded cities by the millions, willing to work punishing hours for low pay. Factories ran non-stop. Ports expanded endlessly. Western consumers enjoyed a miracle of abundance. Cheap clothes, cheap electronics, cheap everything. Inflation stayed low. China grew rich. But addiction crept in quietly. Local governments borrowed heavily to build more capacity. They needed growth to service debt, so they built even more factories. By the mid-2010s, China's steel capacity alone exceeded that of the rest of the world combined. Industrial zones were producing goods faster than global demand could absorb them. Prices began falling, not because of innovation, but because of desperation. Factories didn't slow down when profits vanished, they accelerated, hoping volume would compensate for losses. It didn't. This is when a powerful word entered the conversation: involution. Involution describes a system where competition no longer leads to progress. Everyone works harder for shrinking rewards. In China, it began with students and office workers, but now it defines entire industries. Companies produce more, earn less, and exhaust themselves in zero-sum price wars. Innovation gives way to survival. Efficiency turns cannibalistic. Solar panels, electric vehicles, batteries, symbols of China's future, became battlefields. Dozens of firms, many backed by the state, flooded markets with nearly identical products. Prices collapsed, margins disappeared, but no one stopped. In a system where output equals legitimacy, slowing production feels like failure, so the cycle fed itself. This is industrial involution, efficiency devouring profit, production devouring purpose. China entered a phase where being the cheapest was no longer an advantage, it was a trap. Solar panels sold below cost to move inventory. Electric vehicles piled up unsold. Tech companies fought over stagnant domestic demand. In 2024, despite record exports, China's industrial profits fell more than 20%. This wasn't capitalism in overdrive, it was capitalism consuming itself. China has faced this before. In the early 2000s, overproduction in coal and steel crushed prices. Beijing intervened, forcing mergers, closing plants, and laying off hundreds of thousands of workers. It was painful, but necessary. 20 years later, the problem has returned, only now it spans the entire growth model. Factories don't close when spreadsheets say they should, they close when politics allows them to. And Chinese political system does not reward contraction, it rewards motion, even if that motion is running in circles. Officials know the numbers, falling profits, stagnant wages, rising debt, but the public message remains unchanged. Keep producing, keep growing, keep believing. By the 2020s, China's efficiency machine had become something darker, an economy competing against itself. From the outside, it still looked triumphant. Exports surged, new factories opened, EVs and solar panels poured out in staggering volumes. But inside, wealth creation had stalled. Growth continued, but prosperity thinned. Economists call this overcapacity. In China, overcapacity is not an accident, it is policy. In 2023 alone, China produced more than twice the world's demand for solar panels. Prices collapsed nearly 40%. Firms sold below cost to move inventory. Smaller players failed. Giants survived only because local governments kept them alive. Jobs and output mattered more than profit. Electric vehicles tell the same story. Over 100 Chinese EV brands fight for a shrinking domestic market. Price cuts trigger more price cuts. Subsidies prevent collapse but also deepen the trap. More supply leads to lower prices, which destroys margins further. The first half of 2024 revealed the cost. Industrial profits plunged, even as output soared. Here's the twist. This isn't entirely a mistake. Much of it is strategic. China has long practiced weaponized efficiency. Subsidies keep industries alive long enough to crush global competitors. It's not about quarterly profit, it's about control. In solar, batteries, EVs, and rare earths, China is willing to lose money temporarily to dominate supply chains permanently. The logic is ruthless. Flood the market, undercut everyone, force rivals bound by shareholder pressure to collapse. Once dependency sets in, prices and terms can be dictated. China used this strategy in steel, shipbuilding, and rare earths. Now it's applying it to the industries of the future. But here's the danger. Even empires cannot lose money forever. When every industry expects state rescue, competition shifts from innovation to subsidy access. Productivity becomes political, and strategic losses begin to rot the system from within. This is the hidden danger of China's price wars. They are not just economic battles, they are fiscal time bombs. Every subsidy today is borrowed from tomorrow. Eventually, someone must pay. That's what makes this trap so tragic. The strategy that once lifted China is now threatening to hollow it out. Domination built on losses is not victory, it is deferred collapse. China's problem isn't lack of demand globally, it's lack of purpose domestically. Momentum has replaced meaning. Local governments need factories running to service debt. Banks need borrowers to justify balance sheets. The central state needs employment to preserve legitimacy. If the machine slows, the illusion cracks. This is state capitalism's paradox. When growth falters, the response is more growth.
When prices fall, produce more. When profits vanish, subsidize harder. Every imbalance is solved with more imbalance. History has seen this before. Britain flooded markets with coal until prices collapsed. Japan's miracle economy hit deflation and stagnation in the 1990s. Rome overproduced grain, bankrupting small farmers and destabilizing society. Every empire that masters efficiency eventually faces the same question: can it stop optimizing long enough to survive? China's leaders understand this. They speak of rebalancing towards consumption and innovation, but rebalancing takes time, and time is the one thing a growth-addicted system lacks. Provinces still build, output still rises. It's like dieting while the kitchen keeps cooking. The irony is brutal. China's overproduced goods, solar panels, batteries, EVs, are exactly what the world needs for the energy transition.